Your industrial operation is a public nuisance, and as of this morning, it is functionally part of our community's jurisdiction. Shut it down, or the fines compound daily." That was Diane Prewitt, president of the Stone Ridge Crossing Homeowners Association. Standing at the chain-link gate of a quarry her husband's company had platted houses next to without ever once reading the survey. She had a clipboard, pearls, and white sneakers that had never touched a working floor. The quarry was mine. My name is Walt Brennan. I am 61 years old, and I have held the blasting license and the conditional use permit on that ground for 31 years. What Diane did not know was that the same permit she was trying to silence carried a setback covenant recorded against every parcel her husband later built on. The county had attached it before a single foundation was poured. She had spent 2 years calling my work a noise problem. She had never once asked why the quarry was allowed to be there first. So let me ask you something before I tell you the rest. If a woman in pearls told you the work that fed your family for 3 decades was now hers to switch off, and you already held the paper that said otherwise, what would you have done? Would you have argued at the gate, or would you have filed it and waited? I waited. I want to walk you through all of it, because the waiting is the whole lesson. I grew up in the dust of that pit. My father bought the ground in 1968, when the valley below was nothing but hayfields and a gravel road that turned to soup every spring. He was a powder man before me, careful to the point of stubbornness, and he taught me that a quarry is not a hole in the ground, but a promise to the rock. You learn the seams. You learn where the limestone wants to break and where it will fight you. You learn that the ground keeps secrets, and that the only way to pull them out is patience and a notebook. You log every shot, every hole depth, every charge weight, every reading. He kept a ledger in a green steel box with a brass latch, and the box lived on a shelf above the office desk where the morning light hit it. When he died, I kept the ledger going in the same hand, the same blunt pencil, because changing the system felt like an insult to the man who built it. He used to say a thing I did not understand until I was older. He said the rock will forgive you for being slow, but it will never forgive you for being careless. I have thought about that sentence more times in the last 3 years than in the 40 before them. I run 40 acres of working face and another 60 of buffer my father bought on purpose, with cash he did not really have, the year I was born. People think the buffer is wasted land. They look at 60 acres of scrub and uncut timber wrapped around a working pit, and they see money sitting idle. It is not idle. It is the distance the law and good sense put between a blast and a bedroom. It is the reason I have slept fine for 31 years. My father bought silence and safety and called it insurance. And every time someone has tried to take a piece of that buffer, the survey in the steel box has stopped them cold. My wife Carol understood the buffer better than anyone who was not a powder man. She did the books for the quarry for 26 years, sitting at the same desk under the steel box. And she was the one who turned my father's loose habit of keeping paper into a religion. Every permit, every state inspection, every neighbor letter, every blast log, every seismograph tape went into labeled manila folders in the gray filing cabinet by the window. She color-coded the tabs. She told me once that a record you cannot find is the same as a record you do not have, and that a man who keeps everything but cannot lay his hand on the right page in under a minute has only fooled himself. She drilled it into me. She drilled it into Nell. Carol passed 4 years ago. The cancer took her in 11 weeks, start to finish, faster than the doctors said it could. The last thing she ever filed was the renewal on the conditional use permit. She did it from the kitchen table with a blanket over her legs, because she did not trust me to label the tab right. Her handwriting is still on it, the loop of the year a little weaker than her hand used to be. I have not been able to relabel that folder. I do not intend to. My daughter Nell lives with me now. She is 17, sharp as a tack and twice as quick. And she keeps the camera system running because she taught herself the software over one weekend with a video and a frown while I stood behind her useless as a fence post. She films everything. She backs it up to 2 drives and a cloud account, unprompted, because her mother told her once that the truth is only as strong as your worst copy of it. She got the filing gene straight from Carol. When the trouble started, I did not have to teach her a thing. She was already keeping the record. I just had to stay out of her way. Stone Ridge Crossing came in 3 years ago. The developer was a company called Marrow Hill Land Partners, and the managing partner was a man named Greg Prewitt. His wife Diane ran the Homeowners Association before the first family even moved in, which tells you something about how the whole thing was built. You do not get to be president of an association that has no members yet, unless the developer hands you the gavel. They put up 140 houses on the hayfield slope below my buffer. Big ones. The kind with 3-car garages and lawns that need more water than the valley has in a dry year. They sold the view. The brochures showed the green hills and the clean air and a couple jogging on a paved path. And they said nothing, not one word, about the quarry that had been working that ridge since before most of those buyers were born. I watched it go up over a summer. Grading crews scraped the hayfield flat, filled the low spots, and laid streets in a curling pattern with names like Sterling Court and Aspen Vista. I did not think much of it then. I had neighbors before. Neighbors come, they hear a blast or two, they read the posted schedule, they get used to it. Most people, once they understand you are licensed and careful, leave you alone. I figured Stone Ridge would be the same. I was wrong about that. And the reason I was wrong has nothing to do with noise. The first letter came on a Tuesday. It was a notice of violation from the Stone Ridge Crossing HOA, printed on heavy cream paper with a little embossed logo of a mountain, citing me for excessive noise during what they called quiet hours. I read it twice at the kitchen table with my coffee going cold. A homeowners association has authority over the homes inside its plat. It can tell its own members what color to paint a mailbox. It has no authority over a licensed quarry on land that was never part of any subdivision, land that predates the subdivision by half a century. I drove down, polite as I could manage, and knocked on the door of the address on the letterhead. Diane answered. Linen blazer over yoga pants, pearls at her throat, a phone in her hand, already turned sideways and recording before the door was fully open. You must be the gravel man, she said. We've had 19 complaints about your blasting. 19. This is a residential community now. You can't just detonate explosives next to children. I blast twice a month, I said. Posted schedule, county approved, daytime only, never on a weekend. I've done it for 31 years, and the schedule is nailed to the gate you drove past. Well, the community has standards now, she said, the way you would explain a rule to a slow child. And your operation is going to comply with them. We're a family neighborhood. People paid a great deal of money for peace and quiet. I told her the quarry predated her plat by decades, and the permit governed my hours, not her bylaws, and that if her members had questions, they were welcome to read the schedule or call the county. She smiled the way people smile when they have already decided you are beneath the conversation. And she said she was sure we could resolve this once I understood how things worked in a community like theirs. I went home and filed the letter. That was the first one. I want you to keep count, because she did not. The second letter came 2 weeks later, and it brought a fine. $500 for the noise event of a single scheduled blast, plus $100 a day until I came into compliance. with a line at the bottom noting that unpaid fines would accrue interest and could result in a lien. I read that line twice. A lien. On a quarry. From an association I had never joined. For land it did not govern. I did not pay it. You cannot be fined by a body you do not belong to. For work you are licensed to do. On ground it has no claim on. I wrote a one-paragraph letter saying exactly that. In plain words, no anger in it. And I asked her to identify the legal authority under which the HOA claimed jurisdiction over my parcel. I put a copy in the folder. Nell scanned it to the second drive. We had started keeping 2 drives by then, one in the office and one in the gun safe in the house, because Carol had taught us that a record you can lose is not a record. Diane never answered the question about authority. She never would. That was incident number 2 and number 3, the fine and the threatened lien, and I dated both. Then the inspector started. A man showed up at my gate on a Wednesday morning in a navy polo shirt with an embroidered badge over the breast that said, Community Compliance Officer in gold thread. He had a clipboard, a tape measure on his belt, and the careful, important manner of a man who has watched a lot of television about men with clipboards. He told me he was there to inspect my dust suppression and verify my setback compliance on behalf of the community. I asked to see his county credentials. He blinked. He said he was with the Homeowners Association Compliance Division. I asked again for any state or county identification authorizing him to inspect a licensed mine. He did not have any. The badge was the kind you order online for $9. I told him the only people who set foot on this quarry to inspect it are the State Mine Safety Office and the county, on schedule, with real identification, and that he was neither, and that the buffer line he was standing 40 feet inside of made him a trespasser the moment he crossed it. I told him I had it on camera. He looked up at the office window where Nell stood with the lens pointed straight at him, and he left without another word. That was incident number 4, and I dated it and filed it with Nell's footage clipped to the entry. The thing about a person like Diane is that refusal reads to her as a personal insult. Every time I declined to obey, she did not reconsider whether she was right. She climbed one more step. The next step was my livelihood. She had the HOA send certified letters to my 3 biggest customers, the ready-mix plant down the valley, the county road department, and a bridge contractor 2 counties over, claiming the quarry was operating illegally as an unpermitted nuisance and warning that anyone purchasing material from me was exposing themselves to liability. She CC'd a lawyer's name to make it look like teeth. The road department called me first, a foreman named Dale I had sold to for 15 years, more confused than anything. Walt, I got a letter says you're shut down. You shut down. I told him I was not. I never had been. And I drove a copy of the permit and the active license to his office that afternoon and put it in his hand. He kept buying. The ready-mix plant called next, then the bridge contractor, who was the only one who actually paused, a careful man with bonding requirements who did not want a whiff of trouble on a public job. He held a $40,000 order for 9 days, while his own lawyer confirmed what I had already told him, that the letters were worth less than the paper they were printed on. He came back. Those 9 days cost me sleep, though, and the principle of it cost me more. She had reached past the noise and gone for the bread on my table. That was incident number 7, and by then the folder had a second volume. Here is the part I did not understand yet. I thought Diane simply hated the noise. I thought she was a woman with too much time, a clipboard, and a need to be obeyed. I did not yet know about the slope. I did not yet know that the noise was never the point at all, that it was a story she needed to be true, and that the real trouble was sitting under her own front lawns getting wetter every week. The deputy who came out the first time was named Ruiz. Young, polite, clearly uncomfortable to be there at all. He parked outside the gate rather than driving in, which told me he had read the posted permit before he ever knocked. He stood with his hat in his hand and explained that the HOA had filed a formal complaint about unsafe blasting near a residential area, and that when a complaint is filed, the sheriff's office has to respond and document it, regardless of whether the complaint has any merit. "I'm not here to shut you down, Mr. Brennan," he said. "I can see your permits posted right there, and I can see your schedule. Thing is, she files, and we have to roll on it. That's how the law works. A complaint gets a response. It doesn't get to be ignored just because the person filing it is wrong." "I understand," I said. "I've got no quarrel with you doing your job. I'll make it easy on you. Everything's documented, every blast, every reading, every letter she's ever sent me. You tell me what you need and you'll have a copy of it." He nodded slowly, looking past me at the office where the filing cabinet sat. "If this keeps up," he said, "what's going to matter in the end is the pattern, not any one day. You build a clean record of every contact, every letter, every fine, every time somebody steps on this property who shouldn't. If she ever crosses a real line, a line with a law on the other side of it, that record is the thing that makes the case stand up. Right now, it's her word about noise against your permit. The trick is to keep it from staying just her word." I told him it already was not her word against mine. I walked him into the office and laid the folder on the desk, 3 years of it, tabbed and dated in Carol's color code. He paged through it, the letters, my replies asking for jurisdiction she never gave, the fake inspector with the $9 badge, Nell's footage logged against each entry, the seismograph tapes filed beside the blast logs. Something in his shoulders changed as he read. He stopped being a young deputy doing an unpleasant errand and started being a man who could see which way a thing was going to break. He told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing, not to confront her, not to give her anything she could turn into her own complaint, just to document and wait. He gave me his card with his direct line written on the back. That was the first time someone in a uniform stood at my gate and ended up on my side of it before he left. It would not be the last. I want to tell you about the blasting, because it matters for what happened to Diane's houses. When you set a shot in a quarry, you are not just breaking rock. You are managing energy. The charge goes into drilled holes on a calculated pattern. The rock breaks toward the open face, and the ground vibration travels out in waves that fall off fast with distance. The state limits how much ground motion you can put into the nearest structure, measured in inches per second, and you prove compliance with a seismograph on every shot. I have run a seismograph on every blast for 31 years. My readings at the Stone Ridge property line have never once exceeded the limit, not close to it. My father set the buffer wide for exactly this reason, and I never narrowed it. That seismograph log, 3 decades of it, sat in the green steel box in the second drive. Diane never asked to see it. If she had, she would have learned that the quarry was not the thing shaking her houses. The slope was. Stone Ridge Crossing sits on a hayfield that looks gentle from the road, a long, easy green tilt down toward a seasonal creek. Underneath that gentle grass is a layer of clay, the kind that turns to grease when it gets wet and locks up hard when it dries. Sitting on top of the same limestone bed, I quarry up on the ridge. Clay on rock on a slope is a slow machine. Add water and weight and time, and it wants to move downhill, an inch a season, patient as anything. When my father bought the buffer in 1968, he also paid for a full geologic survey of the whole ridge and the slope below it, because a powder man who does not understand the ground he is sitting on is not careful. He is a hazard waiting for a date. That survey, done in 1971 by a licensed engineering geologist, mapped the clay layer foot by foot, found a spring seeping out of the hillside that fed the creek, and warned in plain language that the downslope hayfield would be unstable for any heavy construction unless it was first drained and the foundations pinned with deep pilings to the limestone below. My father filed the survey with the county. The county read it, took it seriously, and attached a note to the parcel record. That note is the reason there was ever a setback covenant on the lower slope. It is the reason that, for 50 years, not one person built a house down there. The land told the county it could not carry houses, and for half a century the county listened. Greg Prewitt's company did not listen. Marrow Hill Land Partners bought the hayfield cheap precisely because of that covenant, then got the parcel rezoned through a planning board his money helped seat, and the covenant quietly set aside in the rezoning paperwork as outdated. They built 140 houses on the slick clay slope and never drained it. Worse, when they graded the lots, they cut straight through the natural drainage swale and filled the low ground, including the seep my father's survey had marked. So the water that used to run off the hillside now had nowhere to go but down into the clay and under the foundations. And they put the heaviest homes, the big 2-story ones with the 3-car garages, right at the toe of the slope where the water collects and the clay is wettest. It is hard to design a development more perfectly built to fail if you tried. So when the houses started showing cracks, hairline first, then wider, doors that would not latch, patios dropping, brick veneer splitting at the corners, Diane needed something to blame that was not her husband's grading plan and her own rezoning. A failing slope is the developer's liability. A noisy quarry is somebody else's fault. She picked the story that saved her family, and she committed to it the way she committed to everything, completely and without ever checking whether it was true. She blamed the quarry. She blamed the blasting. She stood up in HOA meetings and told her frightened neighbors that my shots were shaking their foundations to pieces, that the gravel man up the hill was destroying their biggest investment 2 times a month. And she told it to enough scared people holding cracked drywall photos that the complaints became a chorus. 19, she had said at the gate that first day. By the next spring, it was over 40. Every one of those 40 families believed the noise had cracked their walls. Not one of them had a seismograph. I did. I had 31 years of them, every reading at their property line a fraction of the legal limit, sitting in a steel box she never once asked to open. The cracks got worse over a wet winter, the wettest in a decade. I heard about it from a man named Earl, a retired surveyor who had bought one of the first houses in Stone Ridge and quickly soured on the whole arrangement. Earl walked up to my gate one cold morning with a thermos under his arm and an apology already on his face. "I owe you a straight word, Mr. Brennan," he said. "I bought the noise story for about a month when I moved in. Diane's good at telling it. Then my back patio dropped 2 clean inches over Christmas, and I went and checked your schedule, and the quarry hadn't shot in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and my patio's still moving. So I started looking at it the way I used to look at a job." I poured him a coffee, and we leaned on the gate. Earl had run boundary lines and topographic surveys in that county for 30 years before he retired. He knew how to read a plat, a soils report, and a hillside. He told me the foundations cracking the worst were the ones at the bottom of the slope, in the wet ground, and that the damage pattern had nothing to do with distance from my pit and everything to do with distance from the old drainage line where the developer had filled and graded over. "You watch which houses crack and which ones don't," he said, "and it draws you a map. It's not a circle around your quarry, which is what it'd be if blasting were doing it. It's a long, wet finger pointing right down the fall line of that slope. Somebody graded over a spring up there. I'd bet my truck on it. Water's got to go somewhere, and right now it's going under 140 foundations. I told Earl about the 1971 survey, the spring my father had marked, the warning about the lower slope, the recording stamp. His eyes went wide and he set his thermos down on the gatepost. He asked if the survey was actually recorded with the county or just a private report. I told him my father had filed it, and the county had attached it to the parcel record and built a setback covenant off the back of it, and that I had the original in a steel box in my gun safe. "Walt," he said, and it was the first time he used my first name. "You understand what that is? That document predates every house down there by 50 years, and it's in the county's own records, and it describes exactly the failure those people are living through right now. That paper is worth more than this whole quarry. Do not lose it. Do not let anybody know you have it until the right room is listening." We pulled it that night, Nell and Earl and me at the kitchen table under the good light. The survey was yellowed at the edges, but clean and whole. My father's blunt pencil handwriting in the margins, where he had noted his own observations about the seep, the engineering geologist's stamp and signature on the last page, and the county recording stamp in the corner with a date in the spring of 1971. It mapped the clay layer in cross-section, marked the spring with a small, careful star, and recommended in plain, unhysterical engineering language that no heavy structure be placed on the lower slope without full subsurface drainage and pilings driven to bedrock. Stapled behind it was a copy of the setback covenant the county had recorded as a direct result. Earl read all of it twice, slow, and at the end he laughed, not unkindly, the laugh of a man watching a thing come full circle. "She fined you for noise," he said. "She sent fake inspectors and threatened your customers and called you a menace in front of the whole neighborhood. And the entire time, the one piece of paper that explains every crack in her own house has been sitting in your gun safe with your father's pencil marks on it." Nell scanned every page to both drives that night, then made a third copy and emailed it to herself and to Earl, because by then none of us trusted that the trouble would stay polite. Earl took a set home and locked it in his own safe. 3 copies, 3 locations. Carol would have approved. It did not stay polite. The escalation that crossed the line happened on a Thursday in March. I was at the county road department dropping off a delivery ticket to Dale when Nell called. Her voice was wrong before she said a single word, tight and fast. "Dad, there's men at the gate, 3 of them. They've got bolt cutters and there's a flatbed truck and they just cut the chain. They're driving inside the buffer." Everything in me went cold and very clear at once. "Listen to me," I said. "Do not go out there. Lock the office door from the inside. Stay at the window and film all of it. The truck, the plates, their faces, the cut chain, everything. Don't say anything to them. Call Ruiz on the card, the direct line on the back. I'm coming now." I broke every speed limit on the valley road getting home, and the whole drive I kept hearing Carol's voice telling me the record is only as strong as your worst copy of it. And I was grateful past words that my daughter was at that window with a camera instead of out on that road with those men. When I pulled in, there was a flatbed parked inside my gate with 2 men unloading orange barricades and a 3rd stringing yellow caution tape across the hall road. The kind of tape that reads, "Official to anyone who does not look twice." A magnetic sign slapped on the truck door said, "Site Safety Enforcement" in blocky letters. It was not a real agency. There is no such agency. It was a sign somebody had printed. And standing in the middle of my hall road in her linen blazer, directing the 3 of them like she owned the dirt under their boots, was Diane Prewitt. "This site is closed pending community safety review," she announced the instant I stepped out of the truck, loud for the benefit of her own recording. "You are an active hazard to 140 families. We are exercising our authority to protect this community." "You cut my gate," I said. I kept my voice level because Nell was filming and because level is the only voice worth using. You're standing on a licensed mine site with no authorization, and you brought men and equipment onto it. That's not authority. That's trespass, and the cut chain is criminal mischief. And that sign on your truck is pretending to be a government agency. Functionally, she said, lifting her chin. This is part of our jurisdiction now. That was the third time I had heard her say that word, functionally. The same word she used at her door the first day, and again in the certified letters. And it was the last time she ever said it to me. Ruiz pulled up 4 minutes later with a second patrol unit right behind him. He got out, took in the cut chain hanging from the gate, the fake agency sign on the truck door, the 3 hired men now standing very still, and my 17-year-old daughter filming the whole scene through the office window. And whatever polite discomfort he had carried to my gate that first day was entirely gone. He did not shut down my quarry that day. He shut down hers. Ruiz ran the names in the plates. The 3 men were day labor, hired that morning off a parking lot and told it was a routine county safety job, paid cash. No idea they were trespassing on a private mine. The flatbed was a rental. The site safety enforcement sign had been printed at a sign shop in town 2 days earlier, and the order had been paid on a company card belonging to Marrow Hill Land Partners, Greg Prewitt's company. Trespass on a posted mine site, criminal mischief for the cut chain and lock, and account for impersonating a government function with that fraudulent sign and the fake safety closure. Ruiz wrote all of it up in his notebook while Diane stood beside the patrol car, telling him he was making a serious mistake. That her husband knew the county commissioners personally, that she was a community leader, and this was harassment. Ruiz wrote that down too, word for word, and asked her to spell her last name for the report. Then he came inside, and I gave him the folder. All of it. 3 years and 2 volumes. Every letter, every illegal fine, the threatened lien, the fake compliance officer with a $9 badge, every certified letter she had sent to my customers, every dated incident numbered in order, with Nell's footage clipped to each one and the seismograph tapes filed beside the blast logs. He sat at my kitchen table and went through it for 20 minutes, slow and careful, the way Carol would have wanted a man to read it, while Diane waited in the back of the patrol car outside. When he closed the last folder, he sat still for a moment, then asked me one question. This survey your father filed, the old one, does it say anything about why those houses down there are cracking? I went to the gun safe and brought him the 1971 document. He read the engineering recommendation about drainage and pilings. Read the marked spring, read the county recording stamp with the 50-year-old date. Then read the setback covenant stapled behind it. He set it down on the table very gently. The exact way you set down a thing the moment you understand it is about to become evidence in something much larger than the case in front of you. Mr. Brennan, he said, I can write up what happened at your gate today, and it's solid. She's going to answer for all of it. This, though, and he touched the survey with one finger, this isn't a matter for a deputy. You need to be in a room with the county engineer, and you need to bring exactly what you just showed me. Don't show it to anyone before that room. Let it land where it counts. The room turned out to be a county commission hearing 3 weeks later, called because Stone Ridge Crossing residents had filed a flood of complaints about structural damage and were demanding the county do something about the quarry. Diane and Greg came expecting to finish what they started. The chamber was full. Earl was there. Nell sat beside me with the folder on her lap. Diane spoke first. She had a slideshow of cracked drywall and a practice speech about industrial blasting destroying a residential community. And she pointed at me across the room and called my quarry a menace that the county had failed to control. Greg sat behind her with his arms crossed, certain. When it was my turn, I did not give a speech. I have watched men lose by talking, watched them hand a strong case away, one sentence at a time, because they could not stop. I walked to the county engineer's table and I laid down 3 things, side by side, in silence. The seismograph log, 31 years of blasts. Every single reading at the Stone Ridge property line under the legal limit, most of them under it by a factor of 10. The conditional use permit, recorded with the county before the subdivision existed, with its setback covenant, and the 1971 geologic survey, my father's blunt pencil in the margins, the engineering geologist's stamp, the county's own recording stamp in the corner, mapping the clay and the spring, and warning in plain words that the lower slope could not carry heavy houses without drainage and pilings driven to bedrock. Then I stepped back and let the paper do what paper does. The county engineer was a woman named Patel. She put on her glasses and picked up the survey first. The chamber, which had been full of murmuring a moment before, went quiet by degrees as she read. The way a room goes quiet when people sense something turning. She looked at the recording stamp. She looked up at the parcel map on the screen behind the commissioners. She looked back at the survey, and at the cross-section of the clay layer, and at the small, careful star my father had drawn where the spring was. Then she set it down and turned to the commission. "This document is in our own records," she said. It was filed and recorded in 1971. It identifies the slope instability on the lower Stone Ridge parcel. It maps a spring on the lower grade, and it is the original basis for the setback covenant that was on this land for 50 years. The structural damage these homeowners are describing, the toe of slope foundations, the dropped patios, the cracking concentrated in the wet ground, is fully consistent with construction placed over filled drainage on this clay. It is not consistent with the quarry's seismograph readings, which I have here, and which are well within the legal limits at the property line. She paused, and the pause was the loudest thing in the room. The grading permit and the rezoning for Stone Ridge Crossing set this covenant aside. I would need to understand how that happened and who reviewed it, because the geology did not change. Only the paperwork did. I watched Greg Prewitt's certainty drain out of his face 1 degree at a time. The way color leaves a man who has just understood the floor is not where he thought it was. He had bought a planning board seat to get his rezoning pushed through. Now the same county apparatus he had quietly captured was the exact channel that would open him up, in public, on the record, in front of the 80 homeowners whose houses were the evidence against him. You build a thing on a lie, and the thing tells the truth eventually. His own cracked foundations were the witnesses, and there were 80 of them. Here are the paired numbers I want you to hold. My seismograph log showed 0 blasts over the legal limit in 31 years. The county's review of Stone Ridge Crossing eventually documented 81 homes with foundation damage from the slope failure. And Marrow Hill Land Partners faced over $11 million in claims and remediation, plus a referral to the state for the rezoning. 0 against 81 and 11 million. The gap was the whole story, and I had been holding the explanation in a steel box the entire time. Diane lost the thing she had tried to take. She had tried to use the Homeowners Association to seize authority over my quarry, and the same authority structure became the record that exposed her husband's scheme. The association was put under county scrutiny for how it had handled the complaints. Greg's company entered receivership. The houses at the toe of the slope were condemned for remediation, and the drainage my father's survey called for 50 years ago is being installed now. At the developer's cost, court-ordered, Diane Prewitt is no longer president of anything. The trespass and the fake agency sign were not nothing either. Greg pleaded to the criminal mischief and the impersonation. He did not go to prison, but he is a felon now, and a felon cannot hold the kind of development licenses he built his life on. The morning after the hearing, Nell and I walked the buffer line my father bought on purpose. The frost was still on the grass. She had the camera, out of habit, but she was not filming. She stopped at the old survey stake my father had driven 60 years ago, the iron one with the flattened top, and she put her hand on it the way you touch something that kept its promise. "Mom would have filed all this so neat," she said. "She did file it," I said. "We just had to open the drawer." That is the whole of it. Diane never lost a minute of sleep over whether she was right, and that is exactly why she lost. She performed authority she had not earned and never checked the ground she was standing on. So here is the lesson, plainly, because it is the reason I told you all this. If you own something real, document it before anyone challenges it, not after. Walk your boundaries and know where your lines are. Keep the original paper, and keep a copy somewhere a fire or a flood or a clipboard cannot reach. When an authority you do not recognize tells you it now governs your work, ask one question in writing. By what jurisdiction? Make them answer it on paper. Most of the time, the asking is the whole fight. Because the people who skip checking the ground are the people who cannot survive the question. The deed is older than the bylaw. The survey is older than the brochure. The record keeps when the shouting stops. If you have ever stood at your own gate while someone in costume told you they owned your work, tell me about it in the comments. I read them. Subscribe if you want the next one. Because next week I am telling you about a man who built a private bridge to his own island and the HOA that tried to charge a toll on water it did not own. Until then, keep your records, walk your lines, and never let anyone fine you for the truth they refuse to read.